Hi everyone, it's Katrina. What if I told you that ancient cultures knew about portals to other worlds and that they left clues to their location? Join me as we explore the history and mystery of these incredible places, from mystical caves to sacred springs. Get ready for a mind-bending journey through ancient beliefs, strange phenomena, and the boundaries between worlds. Gateway to the Fairy Realm. Is there really a portal to the land of eternal youth? Legends from around the world speak of a gateway that takes you to a place populated by spirits, ancient ancestors, and powerful deities. But how can you find this gateway, and how can you pass through it? From the deserts of Mongolia, where the dark-haired shamans practice mystic ceremonies, to the Emerald Isle, where Irish lore speaks of a supernatural land called Tir na Nog, portals to the fairy world are everywhere. Just about every ancient civilization talked about a world parallel to our own, a mirror realm filled with fairies and other strange creatures. These portals were typically opened on important days of the year, like on the solstice or on a new moon, and typically only at dusk, at the exact moment between sunset and moonrise. In medieval times, people visiting the fairy realm was a lot more common than it is now. Reverend Robert Kirk, a Scottish scholar and clergyman, published a book in 1691 on the subject. His book was a collection of first-hand accounts of people's encounters with elemental creatures. Keep in mind this was the 17th century and the Inquisition was in full swing, so Robert was not the most popular man with the church. Some even speculated that Robert had been sent by the devil to corrupt the faithful by luring Christians back to their old pagan ways. On a late summer evening, Robert was walking through the countryside when he fell so hard he actually died upon what's known as a fairy hill. After his funeral, he appeared to his cousin in a dream and said that he needed to be rescued from the land of the fairies. Robert claimed he wasn't dead, but merely trapped in a magical slumber while his spirit essence roamed the world of the supernatural. His cousin failed to perform the proper ceremony to release his spirit, so Robert was lost to the fairies for all of eternity. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. How would you like to be stuck in fairyland forever? I can't tell you for sure whether Robert's fate was left to the fairies, but I can say that there are similar tales told as far away as Japan. The Japanese have the legend of Urashima Taro, a fisherman who visited the mythical undersea kingdom of Ryugo-jo. He was only down there for 3 days, but when he returned to Earth, 300 years had passed. The Japanese also have legends of fairy-like creatures slipping through portals and gateways on certain days of the year, typically solstices and equinoxes. In Scotland and Ireland, the elves and fairies used to enter our realm through real magical doorways in the form of stone circles. Here's an interesting idea. This whole time you've been thinking Stonehenge is an observatory, but what if it's a gateway to the fairy dimension? Many people believe that Stonehenge itself was used as a fairy door to connect the earthly realm with the domain of the supernatural. This could explain why there are so many stone circles scattered across the world with such mysterious purposes. Scientists have been going about things too scientifically. Maybe the only reason we don't see fairies anymore or have people disappearing into the spirit realm is that the modern world destroyed the gateways that lead there. Do you think there's a chance that portals to parallel worlds or to other dimensions might actually exist? The Gateway of the Gods. Moving from one dimension to another requires a significant amount of energy. If Peru's Gate of the Gods truly is a dormant portal, what kind of energy might get it working again? The Gate of the Gods is one of the greatest enigmas in all of South America, and by far one of the most enthralling discoveries in Peru. It's a normal-looking doorway carved from pink marble, only it doesn't seem to go anywhere. The gateway is carved into a stone that leads to nowhere. Maybe that's just because the batteries need a charge. Proponents of this theory say that to put the mystery into perspective, imagine giving a television screen to somebody from the Roman Empire. They would have no idea what they were looking at, right? A TV would make no sense to someone from Rome 2,000 years ago. They would likely think the television was maybe a mirror because of the reflection on the blank screen. Without power to turn it on, they'd be stumped. And that could be the situation with this door. When archaeologists look at it and see nothing, that's only because there is something missing. The energy source isn't there to activate the portal, which the Inca may have used to send mortals and gods between worlds. What do you think about this theory? The Gate of the Gods is at the archaeological site of Ayumarca on the shores of Lake Titicaca. According to the Inca, this great lake was the birthplace of the entire world. They believed their civilization was birthed from the lake by their creator gods. They believed that when their people died, their souls were returned to the lake's water. Lake Titicaca was an incredibly mystical place for the Inca, thought of as the thinnest boundary between their physical realm and the place of the gods. It was the perfect location for a real-life stargate. In 1996, a Peruvian tour guide named José Delgado was exploring the area when he found the Gate of the Gods. José wasn't wandering around by accident, though. He had a dream of discovering a rocking gate, and it inspired him to wander a bit off the beaten path. José saw the gate from his dreams and approached it cautiously. When he got close, he nearly passed out from an intense onslaught of indescribable energy that seemed to radiate from the gate. This story makes it seem like latent energy was expelled from the portal when a living being got near it. Like an automatic door opening, only the door didn't have enough energy to open all the way. Do you think that there were other worlds and magical ways to enter them? Keep watching, because next up is an Italian gateway known for swallowing alchemists. The secret alchemical portal. Alice went through the looking glass and Lucy passed through the cupboard and into Narnia. 17th century alchemists did something similar by vanishing through a mysterious doorway, one that supposedly leads any who can interpret its message to somewhere far away in space and time. I'm talking about a real physical door, one that you can see for yourself on your next trip to Rome. If you've ever been to Rome, you may have walked right by it and not even noticed it. Without knowing the backstory, the Porta Alchemica looks like any other decoration in the Eternal City. This is no ordinary door, though. It is a portal to the world of ancient alchemy. Porta Alchemica was originally built around 1680 for the Roman nobleman Massimiliano Palombara. It was one of the 5 doors leading into his villa near Piazza Vittorio. Now the door is by itself, its white frame stuck to a crumbling brick wall. It looks like somebody mounted a full-length mirror onto an ancient wall, and all that remains is the frame. That frame is covered in some seriously strange symbols. Along with the alchemical symbols are inscriptions in Hebrew, Latin, and Egyptian. On either side of the door are the statues of deformed creatures thought to represent an Egyptian divinity, but no one knows for sure. They supposedly stood at an ancient Egyptian temple dedicated to the gods Isis and Serapis. However, the statues were stolen, brought to Rome, and incorporated into the doorway. This leads me to the man himself, Massimiliano Palombara. Legend has it that he and his friends were obsessed with esoteric science. They were also very wealthy, meaning that they could employ the best alchemists in Italy. Massimiliano's friend group included the famous astronomer Domenico Cassini, Swedish queen Christina, and the alchemical scholar Father Athanasius Kircher. This group of friends called themselves the Alchemists of Palazzo Riario. What exactly they did is a source of speculation. Even after all these years, their alchemical practices are unknown. They were likely trying to figure out how to transmute gold, but there could have been something more mystical at work in their laboratories and dungeons. None of the other doorways of Massimiliano's villa survive, so nobody knows what was originally on them. No one knows what the strange symbols on the surviving doorway mean anyway, but apparently, those who figure it out disappear. Like the 17th century alchemist Giuseppe Francesco Borri. Rumor has it that he was obsessed with whatever strange alchemical mysteries were unfolding at the villa. He spent the night there under the guise of a pilgrim, and was gone the next day. All that remained of Giuseppe was a mysterious paper covered in unknown symbols and equations. It's believed he was able to somehow teleport using the villa's magical doorways. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time. I want to give a big thank you to Flasha has saved every one of us for the super thanks. It really means a lot. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. Contacting the devil. Each year, thousands of people flock to a cave in eastern Finland in hopes of speaking to the devil. It's a place that, if they could, the church would have shut down years ago. You can't come up with a more blasphemous name for somewhere than the Devil's Church Cave. It's about as anti-Jesus as you can get. But that is the name of this popular tourist attraction. The Devil's Church Cave is a narrow cave where local pagans gathered for centuries to connect with the spirit world. Long after paganism was replaced by Christianity, the cave continued to be used secretly by shamans. It's still being used to this very day by the shamanistic community. Practitioners go down into its depths to speak with the dead. And of course, the devil. One of the most famous shamans in the area was a man known as Kinolainen, according to the history records. He utilized the Devil's Church Cave as a dark and ominous house of worship, where he conducted magical rituals. Kinolainen would take his patients, if you can call them patients, to the cave to have discussions with the devil. They would go down to the bottom of the cave, pound some drums, and commune with the king of hell. The shaman's patients would leave believing that Satan had spoken to them. You might be thinking the devil would tell these poor people all kinds of nasty things, but usually he told them how to cure whatever was ailing them. People who were suffering from illnesses would take part in these rituals because the devil promised them a miracle cure. Now there is something the church would like to avoid at all costs. It's one thing for Jesus to be handing out miracles, but not the devil. Scientists think they figured out the mystery behind the cave and why people believe they hear the voice of the devil. It likely has more to do with acoustics and natural frequencies than anything supernatural. A team of scientists from the University of Eastern Finland recently studied the acoustics of the Devil's Church Cave. They found that the acoustics are incredibly unique. The resonance inside the cave is enough to give the illusion of the presence of spirits. In other words, the cave manipulates sound so effectively that it creates the sensation of supernatural energy saturating the air. The sound does something to the human brain, tricking it into hearing voices and feeling the intense energy of an otherworldly presence. Either that or scientists are totally wrong. Maybe the cave's smooth walls do rub against the borders of hell, and the devil has been whispering medical advice to people just for fun. Swimming holes or portals to hell? Long before modern-day divers explored their depths, the ancient Maya recognized the sacred power of cenotes. These mystical pools were not merely sources of fresh water. They were portals to the underworld Xibalba, a realm of darkness and divine judgment. Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula is riddled with underground tunnels and caves, making up a dark and flooded world. There are thousands upon thousands of them. Some of them are so big you can kayak through. If you were to ask a geologist, they would tell you that cenotes are sinkholes created by acidic erosion of limestone. And while that is true, there is a much more mystical side to these sinkholes as well. For example, did you know that almost every major Maya city was built either near a cenote or directly on top of one? The Maya used these pools as their main source of fresh water. And they were also portals to Xibalba, which translates from the ancient Maya language as place of fear. The Maya believed their sacred sinkholes were windows into the underworld, and that deep below the surface were the souls of the dead. This is likely why archaeologists keep finding animal sacrifices at the bottoms of cenotes. The Maya sacrificed creatures to appease the gods of the underworld. Sometimes they offered more than animals. Sometimes they offered humans. Spanish conquistadors wrote that they witnessed the Maya sacrificing young men to the rain god Chak. The victims would be lowered into a cenote until they drowned. After a while, the victim would be lifted out of the water, supposedly with a message from the gods attached to their blue and dripping corpse. The message was then deciphered by a shaman. Animal sacrifices did not end with the collapse of the ancient Maya civilization. Annual animal sacrifices are still happening right now in small Maya communities. They usually sacrifice bulls and throw them into cenotes. It's not just about appeasing the gods anymore. The myth of Xibalba lives on. Many modern Maya still believe that cenotes are thin places where the world of the living is within the reach of the world of the dead. Mount Shasta. If you want to have a paranormal experience without leaving the United States, head on over to Mount Shasta in California. Not only is it supposedly home to an underground city of technologically advanced creatures, Mount Shasta is also considered a thin place, just like the Maya cenotes. If your mind is open enough while visiting Mount Shasta, you might find yourself experiencing something that science can't explain. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. There is said to be an underground city beneath the mountain, first discovered by a British prospector in 1904. But is it true? And if so, how is this not common knowledge? The prospector was J.C. Brown, hired by the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England. His job was to search for gold. What Mr. Brown found instead was something scientists still refuse to accept. According to legend, Mr. Brown stumbled upon a cave. It was massive, continuing like a huge gaping throat into the mountain for 11 miles. That is an insane length for a cave. He didn't find much until he got to the bottom, where he came across an abandoned village filled with gold and mummies. Some of the mummies were a staggering 10 feet tall. These were the remnants of ancient giants. That is, assuming the story is real and not a hoax. But if it was supposed to be a hoax, it wasn't a very good one. Mr. Brown didn't tell his story until 30 years later. When he finally opened up, it was to a man named John C. Root. John was a little more ambitious and immediately put together an exploration team in Stockton, California. He had about 80 people on the team committed to searching for the entrance to the hidden mountain village. Brown was supposed to lead them, but he never showed. Nobody ever saw Brown again. The search team never found the tunnel leading to the abandoned village of giants. And for that matter, no one has ever come up with proof that there is a city in the mountain. Mount Shasta does have many caves though, like Pluto's Cave, an ancient volcanic lava tube. It looks like it may have once twisted and turned all the way to the heart of the mountain. Over the years, the legends have become more and more bizarre. There's supposedly a city called Telos inside the mountain. It was the last home of the Lemurians after their continent of Lemuria was destroyed. Mount Shasta is also supposedly home to the lizard people, the reptilian humanoids who may or may not control the Illuminati. And it's a UFO hotspot. It also attracts followers of metaphysics and fringe religions. It became the favorite gathering place of the Ascended Masters, who claim to be enlightened beings who exist in other dimensions. Have you ever been to Mount Shasta? Let me know in the comments below. Astral projection proven real. I'm sure you've noticed the incredible similarities between the lost cultures of Peru and ancient Egypt. Have you ever wondered how civilizations separated by thousands of miles developed similar cultures? The answer might have to do with interdimensional portals. We are heading to the Andes Mountains for this one, to a mysterious monument known as Naupa Huaca. The site is in the middle of nowhere, halfway up an almost vertical ravine. Many years ago in the ancient past, someone carved an entrance into the side of the mountain. Then they took a piece of bedrock and carved it into the shape of a door. A door that doesn't go anywhere. It's the gate of the gods all over again. Only this time things are a little more electric. This style of doorway, known as a false door, can be found on the other side of the world in Persia and Egypt. Some say that Naupa Huaca marks the exact place where the electromagnetic currents of the world flow. The natural electromagnetic currents seem to move directly through the false door, as if it was built to channel those energies. And here's the really profound part, the thing that ties all of this together in a neat bow. Electromagnetic currents have been attributed to out-of-body states such as astral projection. Have you ever tried astral projection? And by that, I mean the act of leaving your physical body and traveling away in your consciousness. It's one of those things that some people swear is real, but science has no way of confirming. plenty of rational people have experienced leaving their bodies and floating away like an untethered ghost. Assuming that astral projection is possible, could it also be possible that electromagnetic currents have something to do with it? Ancient societies may have understood how to use such currents to break free of their physical bodies and travel vast distances. This is where the false doors come into play. Someone may have stood at the threshold of this door in Peru, focused their mind, and then pushed their consciousness through the door. Their soul, so to speak, was then carried like a paper plane on a wind to another false door in an Egyptian temple. It was like FaceTiming with your spirit thousands of years ago. Scientists can't come up with any other reason why this doorway was put in such a random and inaccessible location. Naupawaka wasn't an observatory, plus it's nowhere near an important city. But when you stand in Naupawaka, the power of the earth is physically palpable. You can feel something pulsing in the air, almost like the cavern is electrified. There is no reason why the Inca wouldn't have felt this too, and understood that it was the best place for them to build one of their magic doors. Did you know there are also concentrations of electromagnetic energy inside the chambers of the Great Pyramid of Giza? The Egyptians could focus electromagnetic energy inside their buildings. That can't be a coincidence, could it? The Ghost City from Hell. For 2,000 years, a ghost city has stood on the top of a mountain in China like hell risen to the surface. It's considered one of the most terrifying gates to the underworld anywhere on the planet. Fengdu Ghost City is so old that historians don't know where the legend ends and the city's real history begins. In Chinese belief, Fengdu got its name when two imperial officials named Yin and Wang climbed Ming Mountain in the hopes of becoming immortal. And they did. When you put together the names of the immortals Yin and Wang, you get Yin Wang, which coincidentally means King of Hell. Rumors began to spread throughout the area that the king of the underworld was living on Ming Mountain, and that's more or less where the legend began. What's amazing is that the city of Fengdu doubled down on the legend that the King of Hell lived within its walls. They started building temples and shrines having to do with the afterlife. The city is still filled with terrifying sculptures of people being tortured for their sins. Would you dare enter the abandoned city of the Underworld King? In 1994, construction on China's Three Gorges Dam got started. The Yangtze River rose, turning Fengdu into an island. A new city was built higher up and the old one was left to crumble. But it's not gone yet. You can still see the murals of evil people falling into the underworld and being savagely eaten by ugly monsters. The Guimen Gate stands at the entrance to the city, literally called the Gates of Hell by the locals. The front of the gate is decorated with 18 demon sculptures. If the Gates of Hell aren't frightening enough for you, maybe you should try the Bridge of Helplessness. According to traditional Chinese belief, the bridge once connected the mortal realm to the underworld. It's said that the virtuous can cross the bridge safely, while evildoers will tip over the edge and be consumed by demons waiting below. Though, as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any real fatalities on the Bridge of Helplessness on Ming Mountain. Let's not forget the Ghost King either, a massive statue at the top of the city looking down on the abandoned streets. The Ghost King apparently holds the Guinness World Record for being the largest sculpture ever carved on a rock. It's the biggest and scariest face you will ever see. So, if you want to experience the Chinese underworld, look no further than Fengdu Ghost City. But if you want to learn about the Irish island with a portal to purgatory plugged by an ancient church, keep watching. St. Patrick and Satan's Pit. St. Patrick is synonymous with shamrocks, green beer, and driving the snakes out of Ireland. But what you don't know about St. Patrick is far more exciting. I'll bet you haven't heard the story about Patrick's journey to purgatory, or how he lived much of his life as a slave. Here's the thing about Patrick that they don't tell you at Sunday school. He was born in Britain, so he wasn't technically Irish. He only went to Ireland in the 5th century to spread Christianity. Unfortunately for him, the Irish weren't that interested in Christ at the time, so they captured Patrick and turned him into a slave. Some years later, Patrick escaped and fled home to Britain, but he wasn't done spreading the word of the Lord yet. He went back to Ireland to preach to his former enslavers. At some point during Patrick's travels, he made it to Lough Derg, a small island off the coast of Ireland. In the 5th century, nobody thought there was anything beyond Lough Derg. Dark Age folk thought the ocean would keep going forever and eventually end in a cascading waterfall into oblivion. While on the island, Patrick prayed to God. He asked for a way to convert the stubborn Irish who wouldn't listen to his message. God answered by telling Patrick that he needed to show them purgatory. Then, conveniently, God revealed a pit leading down into purgatory on the island. When the Irish unbelievers climbed into the pit and witnessed souls being tormented for not embracing Christianity, God promised they would convert. God basically told Patrick to start organizing tours to the gates of hell. It would be years later that the hole was plugged by a monastery. The Irish couldn't have an actual hole to hell sitting around unguarded, or demons would surely start crawling out of it. The monastery acted like a giant bathtub plug to keep the demons in the underworld where they belong. Even with the hole plugged, Lough Derg never lost its popularity. By the end of the 12th century, Patrick's Pit to Purgatory had become one of the most important pilgrimage destinations in Europe. Poets, Renaissance figures, and Spanish princes flocked to the island in droves. Not much is left of the glory days, though. There was a cave on the island said to be the original hole revealed to Patrick, but it was closed in 1632. Some say that if you visit the island late at night and stay completely silent, you can still faintly hear the screams of the sinners being tortured in purgatory. The most haunted forest ever. Where do you go if you want to see a ghost? Maybe your local haunted manor or that abandoned house a few blocks down covered in graffiti. Maybe New Orleans. In Japan, there is an entire forest said to be filled with ghosts. It's one of few places in the world where it feels as though you are walking through the spirit realm. I'm not sure many people could survive the night in this place. Japan's Aokigahara forest is incredibly beautiful and eerie. It's also known as the Sea of Trees, or by a far more insidious name that you may already know. The forest is famous for the number of deaths that have happened beneath its dark canopy, but its history is much richer than many people realize. Horrible things have been happening in the woods for longer than the internet has been around. You can see this forest for yourself. You don't need to be a morbid ghost hunter. It's a real forest with miles of trails that you can hike just like any national forest. It's also near Mount Fuji, the tallest mountain in Japan. It wouldn't be unusual to spend a day hiking through the woods here. Just make sure you return to civilization by nightfall. The forest is full of hinoki cypress and hemlock trees, which block out nearly all sunlight. On rainy days, it's like walking under a huge umbrella. On sunny days, you're going to feel like a vampire because there's no sunlight. When night finally comes, forget seeing by moonlight. The forest becomes pitch black. Historically, Aokigahara Forest has had a reputation as being home to yurei, or ghosts of the dead. Yurei are just like ordinary ghosts, only they don't have unfinished business. Instead, they have been barred from enjoying a peaceful afterlife. There are ghosts who have been transformed into vengeful spirits due to some horrible event in their life. Sometimes, if a person dies abruptly, or if they are murdered, or if the proper burial rites are not performed, they transform into a yurei. Without being allowed into the afterlife, these restless spirits wander the world in eternal purgatory. In Japan, they seem to concentrate inside Aokigahara Forest. People who go exploring in this woodland on their own often speak of seeing the yurei drifting through the trees or screeching in torment. There may even be physical proof of the ghosts. According to some, the soil of this forest has a magnetic iron base. This has caused GPS devices and mobile phones to malfunction. People say this is the fault of the demons and the yurei, but there is no way for scientists to confirm it.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Secrets under Rome. The Santa Priscilla Catacombs is a mysterious underground labyrinth of ancient burial chambers that can be found beneath the streets of Rome, and many don't even know it exists. Professional archaeologists began to investigate the catacombs at the end of the 19th century. They were initially hoping to find treasure, but instead found a total disaster. The marble sarcophagi that had once held bodies of Romans were shattered into pieces. Beautiful mosaics had been torn right off the walls, altars dismantled, and entire skeletons were found with their bones ripped apart. This plundering had been carried out 200 years earlier, and guess who ordered the catacombs to be destroyed? It was the Vatican. In the middle of the 17th century, Pope Innocent X sent tomb raiders down into the depths of the catacombs for either one of two reasons. Some say the Pope had either been searching for lost treasure or had purposely ordered the cemeteries to be destroyed because the church believed they were cursed. Historians can't agree on which was correct. But here's what makes this story so much more interesting. There's a part of the catacombs called the Capella Greca. It's a Greek chapel with faded frescoes on the wall featuring women instead of men. Almost nowhere else in the ancient world can so many frescoes be seen showing women apparently leading a religious mass. In other words, acting as priests. While most of the chapel has been destroyed, many of these female priests can still be seen faded on the walls of these hidden catacombs. Most experts believe it was the Vatican who ordered the whole place destroyed to keep this part of history a secret. Giorgio Otranto, professor of ancient Christian history, says that women did serve as priests in the early days and it was fairly widespread. Papal letters, ancient writings, and inscriptions on burial vaults like the ones in the catacombs of Rome prove that women were serving as priestesses. However, the church then decided that it would be forbidden and tried to stamp out all evidence that this ever happened. New Shabad Underground City. The New Shabad underground city was a very advanced subterranean metropolis that was used 1,500 years ago. The below-ground city is 3 stories and was once used by the ancient Persians to seek refuge in times of war. The city is sprawled underneath the city above ground with the same name, which can get kind of confusing. Despite its immense scale and long history, nobody even knew about this place until about 10 years ago. That was when a man broke through one of the walls of the ancient city while he was digging a sewage ditch. Archaeologists arrived to map the enormous underground city. It's about 60 feet deep, and there's tunnels, chambers, staircases, and even booby traps. This is now considered one of the greatest marvels in ancient engineering. It was almost like a hotel with hallways and rooms with their own water pipes, storage spaces, and even toilets. It's believed that construction began during the Neo-Persian Empire, sometime between 224 and 651. The secret city likely began as a spattering of underground chambers where women, children, and elderly people could hide whenever the city was attacked. But as these chambers grew larger and water pipes and air ducts were installed, it became a real city that was fully sustainable. It's hard to say when exactly it was abandoned, but it may have been used up until the 20th century. Parts of the city are actually open to tourists, so you can go visit for yourself. Elmina Castle. The town of Elmina, located on the coast of Ghana, has a dark secret. This secret is held inside Elmina Castle, a massive structure built during medieval times. It's actually still the biggest European building ever built in tropical Africa. It's a picturesque place and looks like a resort on the edge of a sandy beach surrounded by tropical palm trees. But don't let that fool you. Elmina Castle was the last place thousands of native Africans saw their homeland before they were put in slave ships, never to return. The terrifying truth is that Elmina and the surrounding area had about 30 slave forts, built all along the coast by Europeans who came to sub-Saharan Africa in the 15th century to get slaves. This was a place of torture and death. The Portuguese, English, Swedish, Dutch, and Danish built these forts from between 1482 and 1786. The original purpose of the castle was to be an outpost, a place where ship captains could anchor their vessels in a secure harbor. This was a time of piracy, and when the European empires often attacked each other on the high seas. The best defense was to hide near a fortress that could shoot at any potential pirates using cannons. At first, the whole region was home to the gold trade. It wasn't until around 1637, after the Dutch conquered the castle, that it became used as a base for the slave trade. The Dutch used this castle as a kind of loading yard for human cargo, which they then shipped to the Americas through the Caribbean. About 30,000 slaves a year passed through Elmina Castle up until 1814, when the Dutch abolished the trade. The lost civilization of China. 5,300 years ago, a mysterious civilization appeared seemingly out of nowhere in eastern China. They built settlements that were highly advanced for the time, great shining cities the likes of which had never been seen throughout the world. The Liangshu culture first appeared along the banks of the Yangtze River Delta. Researchers believe their greatest city of them all was Liangshu City, built during the Stone Age. Its ruins are still there today beside the river, although they've been horribly eroded by time and the elements. Archaeologists have found evidence of extreme technological advancements, inventions of agriculture and aquaculture, and signs of a complex social society. In fact, researchers have called this mysterious city the Neolithic Venice of the East because some of their architectural features seem to support hydraulic engineering. Things like canals, water reservoirs, and dams used to keep the food growing and the population booming. Here's where things get really strange. For about 1,000 years, the culture progressed with miraculous speed. Then, around 4,300 years ago, this city was abandoned overnight, and nobody knows why. Of course, there are theories. Geologist Christoph Spottel from the University of Innsbruck says it could have had something to do with a great flood. A thin layer of clay was found preserved over the ruins, which means the flood may have been so bad that the city and its people were completely buried in a thick layer of muck. Ancient Ukrainian pyramid. Archaeologists recently unearthed something in Ukraine that's a little unbelievable. They found the remains of an ancient pyramid that predates the Egyptian pyramids by at least 300 years. This mysterious pyramid was found near the city of Lugansk in the east. According to the head of excavations, Viktor Klochko, this is the first evidence of any kind of pyramid monument in Eastern Europe, and it could actually change the current understanding of social structures in this part of Europe and what we thought we knew about the development of farmers and cattle herders into complex societies. Based on the evidence at the site, the pyramid was built 5,000 years ago during the Bronze Age by an early cult of sun worshippers. The pyramid was part of a larger complex, a kind of religious city focused on worshipping the sun. There were temples, altars for sacrifices, and homes for the people who lived nearby. Archaeologists have even found the graves of the sacrifice victims. What made this particular cult so horrifying is that they didn't simply cut their victims' throat, they burned them alive. We don't know how many more of these ancient religious cities might be around, but considering this pagan cult was in operation for about 2,000 years, there could be lots of them. It's just that they've all been destroyed or their ruins are buried under modern city streets. The Erotic Art of Pompei. There is a rather unusual secret in the ancient Roman city of Pompeii that not many people know about. It's not a building or a temple or a cave. The secret is that for some unknown reason, there is an obscene amount of erotic art scattered throughout Pompeii. Once you start looking around, you can see it's everywhere. Pompeii was a Roman city built in the shadow of the great Mount Vesuvius. When it erupted in the year 79, it blanketed the city in hot ash and killed pretty much everything. The entire city, as well as its dead residents, were then trapped in stone. In the 19th century, archaeologists started excavating Pompeii. Almost immediately, they started finding erotic examples of artwork, couples in the midst of copulation, nude sculptures, and images of gods with some rather gratuitous body parts. Since this kind of thing was considered shameful at the time of the discoveries, most of it was swept under the rug and kept from the general public. It wasn't until 2000 that many of these images and statues were finally revealed. Otherwise, it was too scandalous. What historians want to know is why the Romans were so obsessed with the erotic. It's almost like half of their artwork involved adult themes. According to expert Maria Luisa Catoni, the answer isn't that complicated. She says that Pompeii's lewd obsession wasn't considered lewd in the Roman world. Before Christianity, these kinds of things were normal. In fact, people even celebrated the naked body and eroticism, rather than try to suppress it. The secret excavation of Jerusalem. One of the strangest digs in history was the secret excavation of Jerusalem. It all started in 1909 when the British aristocrat Montague Brownlow Parker put together a team of other scholarly types who had no training in archaeology at all. They went to Jerusalem at a time when the Ottoman Empire was still in control of the region. What they were hoping to find was the famous Ark of the Covenant, or King Solomon's treasure from 3,000 years ago. Parker paid 500 British pounds, which equals about $80,000 in today's money, and made a secret deal with Ottoman officials to split whatever loot he found. They first arrived in the Palestinian port of Jaffa, but were slightly delayed because of outbreak of the plague. Finally, they made it to Jerusalem. Their intention was to dig on the slope of Temple Mount, a place where no archaeological digging is allowed. This is a holy site for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But it's been managed by the Muslim community ever since the days of the Crusades. For nearly 800 years, no one had been allowed to mess around with the Temple Mount. But these aristocrats managed to bribe their way in, get rid of the guards, and dig passages underneath for 9 days straight. Still, they couldn't find the Ark of the Covenant. They finally went into an even holier place, a cave called the Mosque of Omar, near where Muhammad supposedly ascended to heaven. But as they were digging, they created too much noise, and the locals were alerted to what was happening. A mob gathered and the foreigners were forced to flee for their lives, and that concluded their dig. To this day, we still don't know if the Ark is buried under Temple Mount. The Skyscrapers of Sanaa. Sanaa is the largest city in modern Yemen and one of the highest capital cities in the world, at an elevation of 7,500 feet. While the new city might be a modern metropolis, the old city of Sanaa is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's most famous for its towering skyscrapers, incredibly tall buildings that were made thousands of years ago, at a time when most civilizations were building huts and single-story buildings out of rock. These soaring constructions are unlike anything found elsewhere in the ancient world. UNESCO says they were most likely built beginning in the 8th century, although the actual dating has proved next to impossible. Because the structures were built from mud brick, they have needed to be constantly renovated as time goes on. This has made any actual dating extremely difficult. However, medieval texts do say that the Great Gumdam Palace was built in the 3rd century BC and was 20 stories tall. That means that 2,300 years ago, the seat of Yemen's ancient rulers was literally in a skyscraper. Secret neighborhood beneath Athens. A secret neighborhood has been discovered underneath the Acropolis in Athens. This mysterious neighborhood was built long before the Parthenon ever stood on the Acropolis hill. It was most likely part of the original human settlement in what became Athens way back around 3500 BC. This was when the settlement really started to grow, with everything from workshops to houses and even cemeteries coexisting. This area probably started being used as a residential neighborhood much later, around the 8th century BC, up until the 5th century BC. In the 5th century, something drastic happened. The area was paved over and integrated into the walled city of Athens. We don't know what happened to the people who lived here, if they left peacefully or were forced out of their homes. Whatever the case was, the entire area was covered up and erased. Not many years later, the Parthenon and the other grandiose buildings of the Acropolis were built on top. The secret ancient city of Cedra. The ancient city of Cedra in Turkey dates back to the 3rd century BC, and even though the town stayed alive until the 13th century, its most glorious time came around in 200 AD, when walls were built around it. They had clean water, ancient temples, great workshops, and even a mysterious cave where Christians performed baptisms in the early days of the religion. Even after all these years, many of the original buildings still survive, examples of ancient Roman and Byzantine architecture that have weathered the centuries, thanks to expert building techniques on behalf of the residents. But what's even more intriguing is that there is an even more ancient city hiding underneath this one. In 2020, archaeologists uncovered ceramics dating way back to the 9th century BC. That's the Iron Age. These artifacts suggest there was a city here even before the Romans arrived and paved over it with their own city streets. Thanks for watching! Which mysterious city of the ancient world fascinates you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you later! Bye!